Hello, PAX Online people. I'm Will Shick, head of Atomic Mass Games Studio, and with me is our not our sculpting director anymore. You're our creative director, Dallas Kemp. We're here to hang out tonight after hours, and we're going to do some painting. So if you don't know who we are, Atomic Mass Games makes the Marvel Crisis Protocol tabletop miniatures game. If you're not familiar with what a hobby miniatures game is, effectively it's a tabletop game in which not only do you play a game on a tabletop with three-dimensional terrain and miniatures, you also get the chance to assemble those miniatures and then do what we're going to do tonight, which is paint them in your very own color schemes. So our game is set in the Marvel Universe. That means we get to deal with a lot of really awesome Marvel characters and heroes and villains. And so tonight we're going to actually be doing something pretty special. You all are going to be the first people to get to see paint put on one of the new X-Men characters that's coming out this November. We're going to be doing the Goddess of Storms herself, Storm, Aurora Monroe. So let's just get this camera off of me and dive right into the super cool miniatures, because this is what we're all here for. So say hello, Dallas.
Hello, everybody. Oh, is
All
that
right.
supposed to do more than that?
I mean, I think you can keep going here for a second. Like, explain what we're gonna do. You're the hobby guy. You were a professional painter. Like, run the people through what exactly we're doing tonight.
Well, I mean, we're painting. We're going to do some hobby. We're going to have fun. We're going to hopefully throw little tips, tricks, some ideas, some philosophies, inspirations, and aspirations at you, and help you get ready to get on the tabletop and just have fun painting, like we
Well,
always.
well, let's start off. Like, how does one get started painting? Like, what's the process here? What do you even do? Because I'm sure a lot of folks tuning in right now, they don't know what this miniature jazz is all about.
That's true. So we make a hobby miniatures game. It's made out of hard plastic, which is a really durable material. So think like classic model kits kind
Like
of
model
thing.
airplanes, model cars, those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, those things. And so you got to assemble and paint your miniature. So the first thing you need to do is put your miniature together with some super glue or plastic glue, whatever your choice is. And then you throw a little primer on there. Primer is just a special paint that has like a nice tooth that lets your acrylic paints flow onto it and stick. And then you paint it up for the table in whatever color you want.
So a couple of the primary tools that you need to get into miniatures painting, you obviously need miniatures. We're partial to Marvel Crisis Protocol miniatures, but there's a lot of cool stuff out there. There's all kinds of things if you're into Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games, things like that. You've got your fantasy things, your elves, your dwarves. There's all kinds of things, but if you want to paint some cool Marvel superheroes and dive into that universe, obviously Marvel Crisis Protocol are the miniatures that you want to check out. And you're gonna need acrylic paints, so hobby paints. Obviously, to start, this is how you're gonna get paints on. There are a lot of different types of paint, but acrylics are the best. You're also gonna need brushes. We recommend size 0 through 2 effectively, so every brush has a different size. You can kind of see my
And
brush here.
watercolor brushes.
And yeah, and you want them to be watercolor brushes, so a lot of different kinds of brushes, but watercolor brushes are gonna give you the best result. Look for a really good tip on the brush, because that's gonna give you a lot of control and it's gonna help you out. If you've been watching PAX, I'm sure you've seen a few of the tips and tricks videos for us from hobbying, so those are also really good informational base to start, and they'll help you get going. So once I have all of my materials, Dallas, what's kind of the process that we recommend in terms of people getting ready to go?
Well, the first thing, I'm watching the chat and we're being heckled. Um,
Heckled? Rude.
by Scheherazade.
Uh-huh,
Um,
uh-huh.
so the first thing you want to do is take your time, clip out the miniature from the frame. I recommend doing one of the parts at a time and slowly working on it. Building the kit per the instructions provided, step by step. You definitely want to dry fit, which means you just take the parts, put them together without glue to make sure that you have them correctly lined up and you understand how they fit together. And then you do it again, but with glue. You just work your way through the entire miniature, putting it together till it's all assembled. And then there's a couple steps that you can do. You can gap fill, like the little gaps. There's a lot of times you got little gaps in the miniature. So you can gap fill it. There's different ways to do it. You can use super glue to actually fill gaps. You can use, which you do a lot and I do a lot, but you can also use different types of putties to fill the gaps. And the gaps are just where the parts come together when you're building a miniature. And then you prime it up and you paint it. And that's the best part. Getting it ready for painting.
So walk us through kind of the ways to approach painting a miniature for the first time.
I'm a big fan of base coat highlight for your first miniature. Like you get a miniature and like you get like say a kingpin here or a storm, and you decide, well, I want this sash to be red. Paint
Pull
it
your
a solid
storm
red.
back over, bud. You've gone off camera.
Oh, did I bump off camera a little bit?
You did bump off camera.
How about that?
There you go. You're back.
Like say you want this sash red, you just paint it like a solid red, and then maybe put like a little highlight, so just a lighter red or a pink or an orange, and that's it. Like that's a really good way to get miniatures painted for your first time. The big thing is brush control and just keeping, like, if you want the sash red and the suit black, just make sure there's nothing splashed over on each one. But just solid base coats will get you a long way. And then you can start learning, if you want, about the other techniques: washes, dry brushing, and blending and stipple.
Where I've primed the miniature in 2 tones, I've used a dark tone and then I've used a lighter tone on top. And what this allows me to do is then I can thin my paint down and I can turn it into a wash effectively, and I can go over the entirety of the miniature of the areas I want the color to be. And what that 2-tone base coat does is it allows that wash to be bright on the top and dark on the bottom. So I'm getting a lot of my shading out of the way simply through this process. And it's one that we use all the time on our streams. It's actually one that you kind of introduced me to and has become our de facto way of painting. It gets really great results really fast. And it's a very simple technique after you've kind of mastered your brush control with base coating, washing, and highlighting.
Yeah, let me actually, I feel a little out of focus. Let me focus just a little bit here. I mean, I just put like a thin coat of like a nice, I just mixed up a skin tone here that I wanted, and I just put it right over that zenith, and like that's already like way better than just leaving it plain, right? And because you got that shadow and that highlight built in there from that zenith. And then you can build around it, which is what we'll be doing tonight as we work through it. I'm going to do some little blending on the skin here. And as you like learn and grow in your miniature painting like endeavor journey, as we like to say, you'll find all kinds of different techniques and different approaches. And I'm a big proponent of just finding what works for you. And just developing that, learning to be happy with what you want the miniature to do for you. Right? Some people want to be the greatest miniature painter in the world, win competitions. Some people just want to come home and after a day of work and just throw a little paint on a cool character, and like a cool Wolverine or Storm, and get it knocked out to go play a game, right? So you kind of decide what's the goal of the miniature and just paint to that. That's my approach. Like this Storm, this is for me.
Yeah, she's not going on a box cover. She's not going in competition. Like, it's really important to realize too, like any hobby or anything that you do, is you're not going to be perfect right out of the gate. The joy, like you said, it's in the process of learning and becoming better. If you just start things off and you're amazing at it to begin with, there's really no excitement about that. There's no watching your skills develop and grow, and so, you know, we always talk about don't get hung up on where you want to be. Instead, focus on where you are, and have the goal and get better. But the joy of the hobby is in improving your skill and unlocking your unlimited potential as a human being.
That's true. I always like to say, like, you kind of choose the destiny of the miniature yourself, right? So, like, what is the destiny of this miniature? Like you said, these are not going on boxes. If I was painting a storm for the box, I'd be approaching it in a much different way. I'd be coming at it with a different attitude, um, and a lot of other stuff. But since this is just for me to hang out with you and everybody else here at PAX, I just want to paint it to have fun. So I'm not going to stress about it, and I'm going to mess up, and I'm not going to do perfect blending or anything like that. And that's great. That's exactly what I want it to be.
Well, and the other thing too that I really enjoy about painting, but hobbies in general, right, is that you learn the most by correcting, what you would call mistakes in anything else. If you don't stretch yourself, if you don't
Oh yeah.
explore and make errors, you never really learn anything. And so the cool thing is that, if something doesn't work, you can always paint over it as long as you follow the golden rule, which is what, Dallas?
Thin your paints.
Thin your paints, thin coats. So I think the number one mistake that new painters often make is that you just expect that paint that you have is good to go right out of the bottle, and it's really not. Like, it'll work, but they're always thicker than you want them to be. So thin coats, multiple coats, 2 thin coats, 3 thin coats, depending on the color. Don't try to rush through with one coat. Take your time, enjoy the process. But as long as you keep your paints thin so that they're applying really smooth, you can paint over mistakes or areas that don't turn out the way you want multiple times without losing any detail in the miniature. So you have a lot of leeway to explore, to experiment, and to try things out. I'm totally going out of focus. There we go.
Oh man, I've totally just like painted something and been like, this is not working at all. And you just kind of go back and you go over it. Like, people talk a lot about like stripping the miniature and you just, getting rid of all the paint. Me, I'm not about it. Like, I'm just about, I'll just paint over it unless I've completely just mucked it up. But it takes a lot of paint to do that.
Well, and the other thing too is, I always enjoy what our favorite color is or what your favorite color is. It's done, right?
Done.
Don't don't overstress yourself when you're learning to paint, or even no matter where you are on your journey. Be happy with what you accomplish, and then enjoy that it was a step in the process. So I always advocate, no matter how much you dislike how something turned out, I would always say just keep it, because it's a marker. It's something that you should be proud of simply because you did it and you accomplished it. And if you learn things along the way, then that's all that matters, and everything you do after that will get better. But if you take the same character and you paint them over and over and over again and you just keep stripping them, you're going to get frustrated. It's not going to be as fun. You're never going to see that forward progress, and you're not going to have that very visual journey of growth and discovery where you can look back and be like, what, I wasn't the best painter here, but I can see the lessons that I learned from this character to this character to this character. Like, you can see that personal growth, and that's something that's really unique and exciting about the hobby and the way that painting works. And I think it's one of the things that really hooks you, is that as you watch your skills grow and you realize you can be creative and artistic and you can put your stamp on these characters. Like, I always like to tell people, I can't draw a stick figure to save my life. Like, I'm really bad at sketching and drawing. Now, I could probably get better if I practice a lot at it, but it's just not something that appeals to me. Painting miniatures is something that really clicked. So it's a way that I can do art. I can have my ability to express creativity and artistry and stuff in a way that works for me. It works for my brain because I have a three-dimensional object, and I find it fun and relaxing and rewarding. And you can do that with any kind of hobby as long as you're willing to practice it. But I really think that miniatures offer this unique experience because people who struggle with art, they have problems with 2D space and three dimensionality, right?
Hmm.
Miniatures are three dimensional, so you already have that cheat where you can see exactly how things work. Are
Yeah,
you
that's
going?
true.
Are you going white costume storm? Is that where we're going with this? Am I doing black suit? You're doing white suit.
I feel like I'm always the one that gets suckered into painting the white costumes when we paint together, but
You
that's fine.
you have always stated that you like painting white.
I do enjoy it. I,
See,
I'll totally do white costume. I'm really in on this skin tone right now.
it's looking really great. It kind of walk us through the process of how you approach, you know, skin tones, especially like any kind. But right now you're working on an African skin tone, so give us kind of like the basics of how you would approach that from a new to intermediate painter standpoint. Like, what are you looking for? What colors are you using?
So I have a couple different colors here on my wet palette. I'm just going to kind of pop that up. I don't know if you can see that very good. I think I have
It's
four
okay.
colors here. Um, so it's I usually pick something very mid-tone when I'm. Oh, that totally didn't work. That no one could see that at all. It was way too blurry. Um, yeah, that's just all blown out. Um, so I usually pick like a mid-tone. I like a nice warm mid-tone, and then
So
I
like a
build
like a
build up.
like a red brown or like a burnt sienna
Yes.
maybe.
Yeah, like a burnt sienna, and I might mix in like a little peach into
Mm-hmm.
that. I really like mixing in a little peach into that, depending on what I'm going for. Um, and then I really just build up the dark shadows. So adding in your umbers. I also add a lot of red to like I do. I'm doing a much more complex layers, but I'm glazing in some red to add warmth to the skin because you want the skin to be warm and lively. So I put a little red in there. Uh, the audience may have caught that. And now I'm going a little darker and I'm just going to keep building up that dark. And then I'll go in with the very end highlight and just pop out all those little highlights. But typically when I approach any skin tone, I just find an image of something that I like, right? And you just mix up a whole bunch of colors on the palette: browns, peaches, um, your burnt siennas, your umbers. And there's no wrong way to paint skin, right? Like whatever
I'll
color
tr-
you
I'll
make up.
trust you. You're the expert. So
Well, what I mean by that is like there's no wrong color, right? There's no recipe. Like there's no one recipe. You can make up any skin tone and you'll find that in the world. Um, somebody's got it. So you can kind of really get in there and just have fun. And I think that just really provides a lot of opportunity for people to experiment and play without messing up, right?
mm-hmm.
Like I said, I use you can do a wash. Like there's a lot of really great washes out there. So you can do like a really light color on the skin and then lay a couple washes over them. Washes are just paints that are really thin that stick in the crevices
Mm-hmm.
and then recede from the upper surfaces. So it kind of creates a natural shadow for you. We like washes a lot here.
They get
Um,
used quite a bit. In fact, I'm using one right now just to darken up the blue gray that I used on Storm's suit.
yeah, so what you've done, you did that glaze of blue over the zenith, and now you're darkening it with that wash to get in those crevices of the suit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great way to go about it. We got a question on Discord. Um, Hobbitses ask, how do you test your colors when you mix them? Do you have a palette you test them on? Yes, I have a wet palette. I typically use a wet palette, or I have a ceramic well palette that I actually forgot to pull up to me. Um, right now I'm just using wet palette, and you can see on my thumb, I test it here. I can't tell if that's actually on the camera or not.
It is. You got it.
Okay. So I test it here and see what it looks like, and then I sharpen my brush. This is what I call sharpening the brush. You give it a little twist, and you get that nice point, and you just get that paint ready to go. We actually had a couple other questions, but I missed them earlier. That was my
You could
fault.
probably scroll on those, I bet.
I
If you
could
wanted
scroll,
to.
but I'm also painting, and I'm having way too much fun painting. At
Way too
this,
much fun to go back.
they can ask me again.
There you go. So, Chad, if you're out there, just repeat your questions. Dallas is semi-watching.
I'm semi-washing. Semi-washing? We're not washing semis.
Not today.
That's a job I've done, though. Let me tell you.
Of course it is.
I keep focusing in. I think I keep moving because my storm just keeps getting out of focus.
Well, she's got a lot going on for that poor camera to try to follow. You got the lightning bolts, you got the flowy hair, the robes. There's a lot of stuff.
Majestic.
She is.
She's majestic. So I actually cheated. I'm surprised you didn't cheat. Well, you're using your finger. I was using my finger. So this miniature is just one of our designs that I was really excited to explore and see what we could do with the material, the hard plastic material. And so we got her on that lightning bolt. She's suspended, a lot of negative space, really awesome. Um, she will move a little when you're painting her, so I see that you're using your thumb. I actually stuck a little bit of blue tack there
Nice.
because I'm not actually holding her. I actually got mine on a little stand. Because if I don't put it on a stand, I'll be off camera. Let me tell you, folks. I will never be on camera if I'm left unchecked.
Certainly when you're painting, not on camera and for yourself, the best advice I can give you is don't be afraid to move the miniature everywhere, Turn it upside down, left or right, like get all those different views going on because it's really going to help everything.
Oh yeah, watching me paint real life, I got that miniature upside down. My fingers are all over it. It's whatever. Like it's whatever you need to get the painting done. So I have like 4 colors here. I've got like a light color. I have a peach. I have a brown red and a umber, and I'm just mixing them in whatever different directions I want, and I'm kind of just more like artistically approaching it, just putting in colors here and there. I may be getting a little carried away.
No, never. Never. So you mentioned, how designing Storm was kind of an interesting challenge and one that was exciting because we had this idea. Well, you had the idea that we could make her fly on lightning bolts, and some of us, me specifically, were a little skeptical about how that would work.
It's my favorite line. We can do it, Shick.
That's right. Normally, I'm with you. This one, I had my doubts, but you pulled it off. Talk a little bit about the miniature process. Like, how does one go from kind of an idea to a finished miniature sculpt?
We have a pretty smooth and unique process, I think, here at Atomic Mass. Um, we got our character list that you work up yourself there, Mr. Shick, and then we start working on. I call them waves, even though they're not really waves. And we look at all the characters, and then I start thinking about, that's when it starts, right? It's like, for me, that's when it starts. It starts really, really early. Like when you first say a character, my brain just starts going already, right? It could be so far away, and we're not even it's not even like a thing that we should be working on. But immediately I start okay, well what would this be like, kind of. And then when it's time to actually work on miniature,
this is why those TPS reports never get done.
I know I'm not working on TPS reports. I'm the worst at reports. I admit. Um, but then that's when we start actually what concepting. Um, we look at the costumes, um, and then we start talking about like I love having like little conversations with you and Josh, right?
Hmm.
Like, what do you imagine? Like, what do you imagine when you think Storm? When you think Sabretooth? Like, what do you see in your head? And then I take all everybody's ideas, and then that's when I go and like start working on concepts, and then and then of course we share it around, and everybody gets their input. But like, I like to get with Marco and Evan, the engineers, and be like, well, what can we do to really push this? Like, how can we really make this character fly or jump? Like, what is it going to take? Where do you need? Where do we need plastic? Where what to make this work? So there's a lot of people coming together and like providing input, and then we iterate. There's no very too few times we're like one and done. That's the pose.
Right. Well, one of the interesting things about getting to work on Marvel characters and in that amazing world, right, is that once you start really looking at all of the amazing artwork from the comics and stuff, which is where we draw all of our inspiration and our character designs and everything, you start to realize that, oh, well, when you just draw a character in two-dimensional space, they can do anything. And, so you have all these great action poses where they're leaping through the air or they're, doing these weird contortions and it looks really cool. And then you go, but if you put that in 3 dimensions, one, obviously our characters have to respect gravity, so they can't just be floating. We haven't figured out magnets that much yet. So they all have to be connected to something, right? You have to have support to get somebody to fly. There has to be material there that holds them up, like you said. And then
Yeah,
two, there are times where when you really start to examine two-dimensional art, you're like, oh, well, the artist gets to cheat. It's kind of like video games too, where you can have shapes that clip or aren't really solid and they can move through each other because it's not physical space, it's not reality. And those things, those challenges, become really interesting puzzles that have to get solved. And you mentioned our engineers. So the primary job of the engineers for a game like ours or any kind of physical production thing is to solve those problems, to figure out, okay, how do we create something that is actually producible, because they are sculpted on computer software now. um, in the past, miniatures were sculpted traditionally by hand in modeling clay or two-part epoxy putty and stuff like that, so you actually got a physical sculpt from your sculptor. But of course, these days, everything's pretty much done digitally because it makes the production process easier, makes breaking the miniature down and reposing easier, all that stuff. Um, but of course, those sculptors aren't necessarily beholden to the laws of reality, of physics, as it were. And so the
yeah,
engineers are kind of the intermediaries who step in and they go, okay, well, this is how this thing actually has to work if it's going to be a real thing in physical 3D space.
yeah. Because that's the big thing they always get around. Is like I think Beast is a great example, right? When we were working on Beast, it's like, what do you imagine this character? And Josh was immediately like, well, I always imagine Beast hanging upside down from his feet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, of course, like that's what I imagine too. But now you're like, okay, well now you got, but what does that mean though in three-dimensional physical? What does that look like from the back? What does that look like from the front? And the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing that you actually said to him today over another character, and I always say it to him is like, how does that touch the base, right? It's got to
Mm-hmm.
touch the base. So like Storm was like a fun example um, of like we do the lightning bolt, that's easy, but how does it touch the base? So where does this connect in the most elegant way, in the most stable way? How
Mm-hmm.
much do we need? How much rock do you have to have? There's a whole lot going into these to make them work. And then just the whole like plastic. Plastic is another beast upon itself.
Right, because the way in which these are produced and molded and stuff has an impact as well. The molds have certain tolerances. They're only able to cast things in certain ways. So it becomes, yeah, it's like every miniature, every character is its own little Rubik's cube that has to get solved of
Yeah,
all of these different questions and problems and stuff, um, which is,
it's
part of the excitement. But it also leads to limitations, and then it leads to things like, how do you make dynamic lightning that doesn't look wrong
you
in three
spend a lot
dimensions
of
too,
time
right?
looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
You do a lot of drawings and you give it to a sculptor, and then they do it, and you're like, yeah, let's do this, and then you look at it for a long time again. But it's a fun little puzzle, and then the plastic is a fascinating material to learn to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and when you think you got it figured out, plastic has this way of like being like, you don't have it figured out yet. Like, check this out. And you're like, wait, what? Oh no. And some of the ones that we like look at it, you're like, oh, this miniature is going to be easy, and we're going to get like very easily to engineer, and it's like, oh, that's a hard one to engineer. And then ones you're like, no, this is going to be real hard to engineer. It's like, oh wow, it's super easy. It's fun if you like putting together puzzles, and you like if you like putting together puzzles, become an engineer for miniatures,
It
because that's
certainly
what
for,
that is.
it certainly forces you to look at things in a very different fashion, um, and in a very unique way.
I'm not even an engineer, and like I like just spending time and learning and working with the engineers, uh, as my job is. Like, it's like that thing that I'm like pseudo learning. Like, I see it, but I don't understand it yet.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what those guys are for. They're for me to ask questions, or me to go, can I make this? And they're like,
Well, there's a fun interplay with that too, because sometimes the experts get kind of tied up in their dogma and what can happen. And this is true in the hobby or anything else, right? And it takes the amateur to come in and say, but what about this? And they're like, no, 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 that can't be done. And then they go, really? Because I think you could do it this way. And then all of a sudden, the master stops and they kind of cock their head to the side and they get that look on their face like, oh. But it,
that's why I don't want to learn it. That's why I don't want to learn it, because I'm able to look at it from a outsider objective, and ask, well, I would say dumb questions, but there's this the questions of, I don't understand. Please help me, but are you sure we can't? Like, let's keep looking at it, because
mm-hmm,
I'm not hung up on how things can be done.
mm-hmm.
Which I think that's the strength of our one of our strengths of our studios. Everybody working together as a team. There's no islands, so everybody gets those opportunities to pose those questions.
All right, what you working on now there, Dallas?
I am
Walk
throwing
us,
some.
walk.
I'm throwing some shadow on the white suit.
So white is often a very difficult color for new painters to paint. So give us a couple of ideas.
Don't use white paint. Rule number one: don't use white paint. Um, Philosophically, white is the reflection of all colors, right? I think we all learned that in what, eighth grade science, sixth grade science.
Has something to do with prisms. I think I learned it from rock cover albums.
Oh yes, rock cover albums will also teach you a lot of stuff. Don't ignore the lessons to be learned from 1970s rock album covers. Um, Change the world. But white is the reflection of all light coming back. So when I paint white, I tend to stay away from pure, like titanium white. So I use a lot of grays, blues. Um, the kingpin I showed off earlier had a lot of periwinkle and apple green in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I use the final highlight for the pure white. That's where the pure white goes, and it gives me a more natural, soft, or sharp white, depending on how I paint it. That's a bigger philosophical discussion, I guess. Um, but the big thing is like this is white, or this is like gray primer run through an airbrush over top black primer, and I'm just washing it basically with a gray paint, and then I'll do a blue shadow, and then I'll just highlight it white. 3 steps, 4 steps, done. And only one time do I use pure white. And you will go, that is a white outfit when it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Black's the same way, right?
Well, black is defined by its shadows, so it's a little different. But yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
idea is don't use straight black. Um, with the exception of if you want shiny black and you're going to use a gloss medium, you can kind of cheat black that way. But that's a very specific like the super sheen vinyl black or something. But yeah, it's we talk a lot on our streams and stuff about blacks and how you can use so many different colors to create so many different tones of black because no black is a pure black. It's always, some blacks are blue blacks, some are green, some are purple blacks. There's just so many different variations, and it becomes a really fun color to play with because you can change it so much just based on like the colors that you're using.
Yeah, I like to call it, I like to call it chromatic black. And then you leave the majority of the surface your quote, quote, chosen black, and only the highlights are color. And then white's the opposite, where it's the majority is not the color you want it to be, and only the final highlights is the white. So it's they're this fun opposite working together.
Mm-hmm.
So see, I just did a quick wash of that gray over that primer, and now I'm gonna find like a blue gray. I'm gonna add that to like the deep shadows, um, and that'll add that little bit of chromatic color there. Yeah, no flat blacks. Very rarely do I use flat blacks. Somebody in Discord, Fixin7 something agreed with that on your chromatic black there, Shick.
It's always good to have allies, so I appreciate it.
It's true. Let's see what I'm doing is typically called 2-brush blending. I have 2 paintbrushes in my hand. You can probably tell because one's actually being held in my mouth. And that second brush is very clean. It's just damp. I put the tiniest amount of thin paint there, and I grab the edge, and I blend it away. Just blend it away.
It's
Now give me
such a guru thing to say. It's like take all your stress and just blend it away.
just blend it away.
Blend it away. Blend it away.
That's what painting miniatures is about. Taking that stress and blending it away.
Now we're getting now we're getting there.
I mean, it's my bedtime. I'm gonna. That's where I'm at. You know.
You're at the blending away the stress so you can go to bed.
Blending away the stress.
Yeah, it's legit.
You can see how thin that I'm painting. It's a very, very thin paint. So I like this like blue gray because what this is going to do, and then I put that little bit of red in that skin tone. And what's going to happen is when I paint these lightning bolts just the most vivid, punchy blue, it's going to make it even more punchy because I've added contrast. Like, oh, we can get talking about contrast now.
Contrast, volume. One of the things that we always like to talk about too is, painting miniatures is kind of the art of optical illusion. You get to play with how the eye sees things, because your goal really is to accentuate all of the detail on the miniature, because your eye can't see things as well at 40 millimeters tall, right? These shapes are different. So what you do is you actually cheat the eye, and you use the way that we perceive things by using shadows and highlights and all of that good stuff, right? Just like an optical illusionist does, to help the miniature out. You can make things that aren't actually there appear like they're there with enough skill and time and effort. But normally what you're doing is you're just over accentuating what your eye would naturally see if the miniature was full size. So really extreme highlights on like the top of the forehead and the nose and under the eyes where the cheeks are. These are all things that help bring those details out to where the eye can really pick them out, and it can suddenly become more alive and more lively.
Yeah, we actually get a lot of that when sculpting too, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
if you saw a 3D render of a miniature ever, like sometimes the hands look really, really big. That's because you kind of want to artificially pump those up to make them look better on miniature. So it's a lot of optical illusion. But yeah, you really want to punch up highlights, push down shadows, just really accentuate the miniature to make it pop on that tabletop. I think I picked out the worst brush. Yeah, it's a little old. I should have retired it, but I'm stubborn.
Another very good, lesson for folks out there is that brushes are not forever friends.
There. Brushes are not forever friends. Old. All of it. Like, just
You are kind of a monster when it comes to that. I don't know if I advocate for following your lead on that. You might use a bit too much.
I probably do.
That's like Bob Ross level. So I went with a very different style of skin tone for my storm. I started with an umber, and I've been building it up with a kind of a burnt sienna and then a peach as well. So I have a much darker kind of difference, and so you can really see how you can really change the feel and the look, the style of the character itself through your own choices with painting. This is one of the things that's really cool about hobby miniatures and the hobby in general, is that everything becomes your own. So nobody has the same storm that you do when you're done with it. It's yours in the hobby. So it's a really cool aspect of tabletop miniatures games in general, is that suddenly these things that everyone have become things that only you have because of what you've done to them in terms of your take and your artistry. I mean, if you want Storm to be in a green costume, you can do that. It's kind of like adult coloring books in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Your imagination is just there. You can just do whatever you want.
That's always been my favorite part about it is that freedom of miniature painting, you know, like you said, I mean, I got a blazing fire vision.
Mm-hmm.
I painted, and it's mine. Like that's the one I painted, and it's cool, and there's none like it, and it's very unique to me. And that's the fun of it, is share with people.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah, you get to share what. I mean, you share it when you play games on the tabletop. You get to tell your own stories with those characters that you've painted. Like, it's a very cool experience because, of course, miniatures hobby games are looking to kind of simulate or replicate, certain instances. Most of the time, combat. In our case, big old Marvel superpowered fights of heroes and villains that you've chosen for the mission. Because you can mix and match anyone you want, show up. Then now you're playing out this Marvel story on the tabletop together. You're creating a shared experience using your characters. So you become the creative team behind your own Marvel story, and that's super awesome too. So it just adds to all of that, right? Like everything that you do is coming together to tell this great experiential story that you are going to get to remember with the person you played it with for ever, basically.
but that's yep, that's why I love it right there. It's like I mean, I've come up with names of miniatures. I've like renamed them for my liking in the past. Been like, this is this character now.
Yeah, I mean, as you really dive into the hobby aspect of it, like because of the material and just the nature of ownership that the hobby incentivizes, like you can go crazy. You can totally change the look of the miniatures. You can make an entire army of Ghost Riders if you want to. You can, yeah, yeah. I outed you. I know. We all know what you're doing in secret,
I mean, I'll show it if people want to see it.
off hours. But you have all the freedom to do all this cool stuff to make everything truly your own, and I think that's really like the biggest part of hobby miniatures that make it so addicting, so fun, is that freedom in kind of traditional colors or anything else. So there's
But
so
see, you're
much.
adding gold now, accents, and I'm still debating if I want to throw gold accents on this
Oh,
white.
this is not gold, sir. This is an ochre. I'm doing the yellow.
Oh, you're going
I'm
like
going I'm going
non-metallic.
yellow. I'm not using metallics here. I'm just using yellow. So I
I'm
am
trying to
using.
decide if I should do the trim
I
on
mean,
the
I'll tell you what you gotta do because we only you talked about it. You got to do it. So now you got to show the lightning, man.
talking about it ain't promising.
Sounds like it was to me.
Mm,
Pretty sure the chat will back me up on this.
I don't even know if I have a lightning blue color on my table. Let me dig. Let me put some stuff around. So, mm, mm, mm.
You can do it. We believe in you.
Hear that chat? Me digging through paint pots.
That's right. This is the ASMR that we were all looking forward to.
50 million paint pots. Ooh, this one's a bit old. Here.
We're all rooting for you.
I got it.
You can at least make it glow. Make it glow.
I still don't know what color to do my trim yet. Maybe black. Black would look really good. So I'm gonna mix pink and some what's that other word for blue?
Cyan?
Cyan. Pink and cyan.
Turquoise? That looks like turquoise to me. Are you making the turquoise? Is that why you need the pink and the cyan?
Pink and cyan. So the reason I'm using pink is because cyan is too dark, and I need to lighten it. But white desaturates really, really badly, and I don't want to desaturate my lightning. I want my lightning to be super punchy. So by using pink, I keep a lot of the value in the color, but I'm still able to lighten the cyan. So this just gives me like a really, really good poppy blue foundation to work from. Yeah, we typically Fisk N7. We use water-based acrylics, and if you can typically reconstitute them with a bit of water. Of course, you can also paint miniatures with oil paints if you're so inclined, which I do enjoy myself. But it's a lot of new learning if you give that a go. So I'm going to at least get a base coat and then ink on this. Then what's going to happen, I'm going to paint the rest of the miniature and I'm going to mess up my lightning bolt.
That's okay, because you can always paint back over the lightning bolt. Like we talked about, painting is the fine art of fixing one's mistakes.
It's true. Painting is this metaphor for life combined into a 1-inch character.
That's true. It's all the life lessons that you need in the size of your thumb.
Right. Now, turquoise ink, my favorite of the inks. I like to just get art ink, just a good art ink. And I love inks. If you've never played with inks, you should give them a go. They're real punchy. They got a lot of pigment. And I'm just going to go really, really thin, just a little touch of water, just a very, very little bit. And I'm going to start glazing this over the lightning, the cyan pink. A glaze, we said earlier, a wash is a thin paint that you put over an element that you want to flow into a crevice to accentuate detail. A glaze, think of like a camera filter, right? When you go get your family photos taken, and they put that red or blue filter over the light. That's what you're doing with a glaze. This is a very, very thin paint over top of the surface to kind of change the tone or value.
I always like to think about those old 3D glasses that had the blue and the red cellophane.
Yep.
and you put those on. You close one eye, and everything turns red. You open the other, and close that eye, open the other one, everything turns blue. It's the
Totally
same
the same.
idea, right? You're putting that film over everything.
Hobbitsis says, this is such a soothing panel to listen to.
It oftentimes is. It oftentimes is. Painting, like we talked about, painting can be a really zen experience. It can really be a nice stress reliever. It can also be a rowdy time with pizza grease everywhere and people yelling at each other. You know, like you get to do it with your friends, and it's a really great way to kind of just connect and hang out. I'm totally going to change these yellow gauntlets to gold.
I love paint jams. It's literally one of my most favorite things in the world. I used to have big paint jams once a month at my house, and I had invite people over, show up at 10 o'clock. I'd cook pancakes and bacon for everybody, and then you just paint all day, and you can leave whenever you want and come whenever you want. There's no rules. But I got a buddy that sometimes it would just be me and him instead of a big group, and we would just sit and paint in silence for hours across the table from each other, and then just every now and then you kind of hold something up and you're like, what do you think of this? And they're like, oh, that looks good. Maybe you should add a little red there. You're like, oh yeah, that's a good point. But even now, like on video, right, with social distancing, we still paint jam.
We do.
It's a good way to hang out with new friends, old friends, make new friends. Teach each other stuff. I'm putting in white into that. I'm gonna put white into that pink and cyan mix, and I'm going to use the edge of my brush, the side of my brush, and I'm going to paint the little edges of my lightning bolts.
Just Get to, to it. 2 minutes left, Dallas. You can do it. We believe in you.
I'm doing it. And then I'll add more white and add it to like the tips and like the junctures where like two facets come together. You're just going to do this all over.
I'm going to sort of join you in solidarity here. I'm just going to get a really quick wash of my turquoise over my lightning so that we can do this together as we close out our time on this panel of painting Storm and talking about, you know, all the things. I think we covered everything in this panel.
Well, fortunately, if you really want to get into like new painter territory, we have a solution to that too, don't we?
Well, you do. You're going to be back on Saturday, is it?
Saturday, I'm going to take a miniature from sprue to table in 1 hour.
Oh my gosh. Like a cooking show.
Just like a cooking show, actually.
Are you going to like put it under the table into the secret oven and then pull out, you know, the one that you already pre-prepared?
I totally have a pre-prepared miniature primed and ready to paint.
I like it. I like it.
I'm not going to stick the other one in the oven. That would be bad.
That's a metaphorical oven is what it is.
So I just can keep building up these edges, and this is looking dope.
Cheap.
So you're just doing a blue wash as well, right?
Yep, it's just a turquoise. I just grabbed Caribbean blue, which is a turquoise. I thinned it out, and I'm just doing that wash over the lightning bolts. And I think if I just ignore doing the back for the moment, all I really have to do is that X-Men logo right there, and I could call this ready for the tabletop outside of finishing up the base. So, just to kind of give an idea of the fact that you can paint one of these characters in an hour and have it what I would consider tabletop ready.
I'm a fast painter, but I did not finish in an hour.
You got lost. I mean, I'll be honest for the viewers out there, right? There's a lot of things that personally, just because of how I paint and how much enjoyment I get out of it, and the fact that I just like taking extra time for those details. Like, there's a lot of things I will go back and do to this storm to finish her up.
Sure.
But like this right here is a totally acceptable, a really great tabletop standard. Like, she's going to look really good on the tabletop. You're going to have fun, playing with this character at this level, and you're going to be able to tell really great stories, right? Like we talked about, destiny really matters. And I think if I saw a storm like this across the table for me, I would be super thrilled with it. I would, everyone's just going to be excited to see the artistry that you've put on. It doesn't really matter about skill level, right? We love seeing things that are amazing and mind-blowing, but just as much, we just love accomplishments. Like, the hobby is all about celebrating each other's accomplishments. And this right here, painting a full character and getting to play awesome Marvel battles with her, that's an accomplishment, and everyone should be proud of it, and you shouldn't be afraid of it. So there you go.
That's absolutely true. Like, absolutely true. Like,
So,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so with that, I think we are at our time. So we're going to bid you guys, all of you people out there from PAX, farewell for now. Be sure to check out the schedule for Dallas's Miniatures Painting 101, where he's going to go through the whole process. So if what you've seen here and what we've talked about really resonates, or you want to know more, be sure to tune into that. That's going to be on Saturday. And check the local listings for the right time for your area. Because, of course, this is going out all across the world. Really appreciate all of you all hanging out with us and, just chilling and getting some paint on these miniatures. We hope that you had a great time. It's been a blast spending time with you all, and we will hopefully see you on the next one this Saturday. You can always check us out at atomicmassgames.com if you want to know more about Marvel Crisis Protocol, or if you want to check out our streams. We also do a lot of stuff on that, so be sure to check out our website for all the cool information to find out more about what you've seen here tonight. Thank you all for joining us, and you have a wonderful evening, day, or morning wherever you are. So goodbye.
Goodbye.